Sitting here with Catherine Massaro, good friend of ours, a wonderful artist, and we want to just kind of discuss how this website came to be. Catherine, you came to Kim and I, and you said, I have a project that has been consuming my life for the past couple of years.
Yes.
And
I thought I wanted to do a book.
Yeah, you did, and we were excited. You know, Kim and I would love the idea of doing a book, and so as we started talking about it, it was a great idea. And then the more we talked about it, you said that
It was not so great an idea. And the only reason I asked about a book was I painted myself into a corner. I'd literally painted myself into a corner without a brush. I'd stopped doing artwork for almost 2 years. And I had gotten to a place where I was completely unmoored from my creative self. I'd lost touch with what I wanted to do, and I had no interest in doing any of it. So I just stopped. I'd go wander and amble around my studio and pull out collections of things I had, and push paint around, and I'd get nowhere with it. And one day, almost out of the blue, as I was over there staggering around, dragging through boxes of collections, thinking, what am I going to do with all this stuff? How have I collected all this stuff? What is the point of all these things I've collected? Years of traveling, and I started stacking things on a canvas. And before I knew it, things that seemed very unrelated over the years started coming together in groups. And it started to be really meaningful to me that I was working three-dimensionally with objects, treasures, and memories instead of pushing paint around on a canvas and creating something in what I'd been very successful at in the past. But this was new, it was unfamiliar, and yet it was as natural as getting up in the morning to me. And I do not know why it happened. All I knew was the minute I gave up on everything, I found my way back to an art form that started to make sense to me.
So were they landscapes? Were they portraits? You were a really well accomplished artist in galleries and very successful
painter.
Traditional painter. You were selling your work everywhere. So I don't know, what were these things?
They were assemblages. I ended up calling them canvas collages because they were a combination of assemblage art, mixed media. But what I wanted to work on, I do not know why I had such a fascination with that blank canvas, but I think it was sort of a holding on to something that was a familiar base that I always used to work on.
Mm-hmm.
And they even became almost a thumbing my nose at what I wasn't doing anymore. It's like, well, I'm not going to paint, but this is going to be what I'm going to work on.
But what you haven't told me still, what were you doing? What were these pieces? What were they?
I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what I was doing every morning when I went out there. All I knew is I was excited about doing something again. And it was like being thrown into the deep end of a pool without your water wings. And that didn't matter. There was something I was driven to do these pieces. I was really driven to start almost destroying the collections of things I had that were very boxes and organized in certain places and filed away. And suddenly, piece by piece, it became very clear where these things belonged. They started to find a home. And more importantly, they started to tell a little story. They were telling stories. And
what stories were they telling, though?
They were telling little bits of my life. They were telling lessons I had learned. It was more like I was telling myself, what have I learned about this? What was important about these objects, these items? And what was most fascinating, and I had no intention of doing it, was it turns out I was creating and developing these things in mandala forms. And one of the reasons I would get out there and I could not leave or wait to get back to them in the daytime is working in that form, in those forms, it became almost a meditation. It was calming me. There was a symmetry to them. There was a balance to them. There was an order to them. And for the first time in 2 years, I found my mind was settled, and I knew what I was doing, and I knew why I was doing it, and I was letting the objects that were dear to me and close to me and familiar to me tell the stories. I was searching for um, a way to, I guess what you'd call, show the pieces. And in fact, I did have a show with them once, but even that show became sort of an adventure in that many of them are very fragile. There are antiques on them. There's pasta on them. There's breakable things, feathers. There's so many fragile objects. Some of them literally can't just be shipped. So I found when I got an opportunity for the show, I did create custom crates for every single one of them. And the only way I could assure they were going to show up in one piece was to rent a U-Haul truck and personally drive them 1,000 miles to the show.
Wow.
That involved employing the help of my sister, who became my road buddy. It became a road trip and an adventure, which really makes me laugh because, in fact, many of the pieces
that's what your life
about
has been. Yeah.
Adventure, road trip. I created a nightmare for myself.
Mm-hmm.
It ended up being a road trip adventure. And over and over again, these pieces keep teaching me things. It's almost like a grown-up version or an artist's Aesop's Fables book, where I've got a story to tell. The piece of art is the illustration itself, but the lesson keeps going on and on and on. And that's what the blog is for. It's a way for me to continue talking about the nuances and the small little side trips that are in the stories within each of the pieces.
Hence the reason for the title, which is
To End is to Begin. Every time I've given myself an opportunity to end something, whether it's my own choice or it has been foisted upon me, or I've just given up on something or had a failure with something. Every time that's happened to me, it has done nothing but give me an opportunity to go on in some unexpected and exciting way. I continue to get rewarded for following that path of letting something end and being okay with what's coming next.